of African Americans but things that people don't know about what African Americans have done. But what I find is more effective in the recent years is to try to explain to white Americans what racism has cost them. Most people really aren't that concerned about, at a fundamental level, about the disadvantages that are placed upon African Americans. A lot of people rationalize those disadvantages or don't want to deal with them. So I've always found it more effective to say that racism is not free for anybody, and that you pay the price, for what has happened to African American people, that you're not getting off scot-free, and that if you still believe in white supremacy or any hints of white supremacy and are not at the absolute top of the social structure, you ought to go looking for somebody to be mad at, right? Because the benefits of being a white person are like shrinking and shrinking and shrinking to be an ordinary white person, a regular white person, not a wealthy, rich white person. And so the payoff for white supremacy, the clientele for that payoff is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And in a sense, the majority of the white American population is dropping down to where black people are, which is to say your unemployment rate, your living conditions, your level of debt, your level of social anxiety is coming down to where we are, And I would like to say welcome to the club, or misery loves company, but I would prefer to think that once you comprehend that, there'll be a possibility of more joint action to correct that situation, And that racism is not just something that affects us, as black people, it affects you, And the failure of this nation to deal with that in the past has consequences for you, And I'll briefly give you a sweeping overview of how this came about, and then I'll narrow down on how, in fact, this impacts on you today. Virtually every discussion of American history, every part of the national narrative that you've been taught immediately gets qualified or disqualified once you bring in the reality of the African American experience. That's why there was always such a widespread resistance to the teaching of the African American experience. Every national mythology, every slogan, right? Every, song you sing, land of the free, home of the brave, when you say, what about black people, you have to start qualifying. In some cases, you have to throw it totally out. This is a democracy. What about slavery? We all created equal. What about Jim Crow? We can rise as far as you can based on your individual merits. What about discrimination, disenfranchisement, quotas? Every single thing, every single part of the national mythology has to be called into question when you bring in the African American experience. And this is not something new. This is at the beginning, the foundations of the country. The mythology of Puritans landing at Plymouth Rock, colonists seeking religious freedom in Virginia. They're trekking slaves with them all the way. The first commonwealth to make slavery legal was Massachusetts, not Georgia, not Virginia, not South Carolina, Massachusetts, right? There were slaves in every one of the 13 original colonies, So a narrative of a search for freedom and liberty is immediately qualified, but what about these slaves you have around you? The state that had the largest number of slaves outside of the South, outside of Georgia, second most largest, New York. This is not a down there phenomenon. You can say, well, I'm from North, slavery was down there somewhere. No, slavery was here. And a mythology, that tries to make racism something somewhere else robs you of your understanding of your relationship to that history. Disarms you in your ability to function in the world, with the antagonism that you see before you. And it's just part of the cost, right? The political cost after the American Revolution. The majority of slaves in the American Revolution fought for the British. Why? Because a monarchy promised to give abolition to those that fought. The patriots, fighters for liberty, did not. Right? So if I'm a slave and have a choice of who I'm going to run away and fight for, I'm fighting with Lord Dunsmore in South Carolina. I'm fighting with the British, right? Not with George Washington, a slaveholder, or Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, or Patrick Henry, a slaveholder. Give me liberty or give me death. What about me? Great slogan, right? The failure to extend that ideology, right, throughout this society calls that ideology into question. Yeah. It's the beginning cost to racism is hypocrisy. You have a democratic Republican constitution. Well, first of all, democracy can't be democracy if half of the population, females, are put in a box and set over there somewhere. Like, we're not even talking about them yet. Let's not even talk democracy, talking about human beings. Democracy means like men, you know, and white men with property, you know. So just the notion of democracy, you know, is like a narrow, finite notion at the beginning. And this is built into the Constitution when the country is set up, you know. And to handle this problem, we set up one of the great quota systems of all time, which is to say the House and the Senate. You know, people talk about they don't believe in quotas and affirmative action is quotas. The U.S. Senate is a quota system. Every state gets 2 senators, regardless of population. Is that fair? Rhode Island and Texas are equal. North Dakota and California are equal. 400,000 white people in North Dakota have the same number of senators as 20 million people that live in California. It's a quota system. People don't object to that one. I've heard a word about that one. Right? So a fundamental inequality was built into the Constitution at the beginning. Why? To handle the problem of what? Slaves. Right? We were here as property. We were brought here as property. Right? But when it came time to count people in terms of representation in the House, we became people all of a sudden. The same people that owned us and kept us on a list with horses and cows, you know, barrels of molasses, discovered when it came time to get political representation, we were people and should be counted for purposes of representation, right? Well, since the founding fathers were wise men, we got the discount, 3/5. We weren't whole people, we're 60%, 40% off, right? So in fact, built into the Constitution is everybody's people except black people who get 40% off, right? How do you walk around the world and talk about democracy when the Constitution says that? The Constitution says that. It's not an add-on. It's the original, right? What does this ensure? Right? Non-democratic representation in the national government of slaveholders. First presidents, Supreme Court justices, right? A national policy, right, that pursues slavery as a policy while talking freedom, right? All of the major wars in this country down to the Civil War are fought to extend slavery. Yeah. The most expensive war before the Civil War was the war with the Seminoles, Florida, Alabama, swamps. Why? Slaves were running away, hiding among the native population. Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Cherokees, Seminoles. The native populations were fighting to maintain their freedom and their independence to keep those slaves with them as free people. This country spent $40 million fighting to exterminate Native Americans in the eastern part of the United States. When they couldn't exterminate, they shipped the Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes they call them, on the Trail of Tears in 1842 out to the west, Oklahoma, reservations. They confined the Seminoles, who are still at war technically with the United States, into the Everglades in Florida. It's the most expensive war this country fought before the Civil War. Not about freedom, but to extend slavery. Right? It's the next war before the Civil War, Mexican War. Remember the Alamo. Let's not remember the Alamo. They have yet to make a movie about the Alamo. They made another one trying to clean it up a little bit. Where's the movie that says that Jim Bridges a slaveholder? Davy Crockett's a slaveholder. Sam Houston is a slaveholder. Stephen A. Austin is a slaveholder. They are fighting to expand slavery into Mexico because Mexico had abolished slavery. Santa Anna may have been a dictator, but there was no slavery in Mexico, and slaves were running away from the South into Mexico to be free. Freedom-loving Texans carrying their slaves into Mexico said, you cannot bring these people here. We don't have slavery. What's the response to declare Texas independent? Not for freedom, but to expand slavery. Make that movie. Put Denzel in that one. You know, as a slave who had run away and is fighting in the Mexican army at the Alamo. That's the movie. Black people in the Mexican army at the Alamo fighting slaveholders. Make that movie. See, the cost of racism is you don't know what happened in this country. You glorify slaveholders as heroes because you don't know they're slaveholders. You're not taught that. You walk around in complete ignorance of that. Right? You have political leadership in the 19th century that ignored slavery. Right? The people that said abolish slavery, we are taught are fanatics. William Lloyd Garrison, all fanatical abolitionists, all fanatic. John Brown, oh, he's crazy. John Brown, oh, he's crazy. Oh, no, crazy. No. What did Garrison believe? Slavery was wrong, should be abolished. Why does that make you crazy? Why is that a sign of lunacy? Why is Thomas Jefferson not crazy for owning slaves? And William Lloyd Garrison's crazy for wanting to abolish slavery. That's what you teach in your books. You know, look at the paragraph on William Lloyd Garrison in any textbook you got. See what they say about it. And John Brown. What did John Brown want to do? John Brown believed in direct action. He was a good American. Got a problem, solve it. How do you solve the problem of slavery? John Brown said, well, it's very simple. You kill all the slaveholders. That's the American way, right? That's why we have the largest military in the world. When we have a problem, kill it. Right? You don't like something, kill it. Right? That's why we got this massive military. Right? You got to drop bombs on it. John Brown was an American. He said, we have a problem, slavery, kill it. They said, oh, no, he's crazy. Why is he crazy? Well, he started to do it. Went to Kansas and Nebraska, to stop the expansion of slavery by killing slaveholders. Guess who caught him? Robert E. Lee at Harper's Ferry in the Union Army. And they told John Brown they were going to hang him. John said, I understand. I lost. I didn't win. You know what his last words were? He said, do you regret what you did? So, you know, the problem was we didn't kill enough people. He said, I made a mistake because I thought we could solve this problem by killing a few slaveholders. He said, we're going to have to purge this land with blood before we end slavery. Now, you would think that somebody listening to that would say, slavery is a problem, let us end it and solve this problem. Nobody did. What happens 2 years after John Brown is dead? Fort Sumter, the Civil War. There are more casualties, dead and wounded, in the Civil War than in all the American wars combined. All of them. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Spanish-American War, and the numbers in Iraq. More in the U.S. Civil War to abolish slavery than in all the wars this country's fought combined. No. But if you had said to white Americans, give me 1 million lives to free the slaves, they said, no, I'm not doing that. But to ignore slavery cost 1 million lives. Right? To not have compensated emancipation, which you had in the West Indies. Right? To ignore racism, right, cost almost 1 million white people their lives. Not black people. They wouldn't even let us in the army. You know, there were only 200,000 black people that had to fight their way into the army to fight. Right? They had to demand the right to fight. Then they wouldn't even pay them equal wages. So they said, don't pay us anything. The 54th and 55th turned back to pay. They said, we can't pay you what we pay white people because you're not good enough. And besides, you're black. They said, don't pay us anything. We'll fight for free. Right? For free. It cost 1 million white people their lives. And over 1 million white people their limbs and their arms. Over slavery. But if you had put that on the table, nobody would have bought it. But the failure to deal with slavery, that's the price white people paid. You know, for looking the other way. For ignoring it, saying, well, it's not my problem. We'll deal with it next year sometime. Right? So you think maybe people would learn, right, after slavery is over. All black people say, well, let's forget about the past. Don't dwell on slavery. Can we have the minimum